This presentation is being recorded just before we begin, so everybody is aware. And I will get started. So my name is Chelsea Wills. I'm one of the speech therapists here with the Calgary Catholic School District team. And today I'm going to be sharing some knowledge on speech sound development, giving an overview of the errors we sort of see at different ages and then how to treat them. So I will get started with a prayer and the territorial acknowledgement, and then we'll get into the presentation. So everyone just center themselves for a second here. Lord, guide all gathered here today to action as we seek to transform lives. May we gain strength and deepen our faith through the work that we do in your name. Amen. In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. And the Creator gifted us with this land that we are blessed to share and care for together. The Calgary Catholic School District acknowledges that the land we gather on, the Kintisis, is the ancestral territory of the Siksika, the Siksika, Kainai, Piikani, and Amsiki Piikani. We acknowledge that all the Treaty 7 signatories, including the Tsuut'ina people, as well as the Aherye Nakota Nations, Bearspaw, Chincoteague, and Wesley. This land is also home of the Métis Nation Region 3 and all others who call this place home. And just for those of us who are part of the district, you'll recognize the Board of Trustees priorities. And our presentation today is going to fall under the Student Success umbrella, specifically supporting children's success who might be diverse learners. All right, so moving into all of this, the agenda for today is, first I'm going to give a really quick overview of some general strategies and hierarchy that would be really great to keep in mind as you're practicing any of the speech sounds. Then we'll dive into each speech sound and when it's sort of expected to develop and how to work on it. So you can sort of see the sound we'll be discussing listed on the screen right now, beginning with kindergarten, working all the way up to just above grade 3 on today. So it's very important to keep in mind that speech delays and disorders must be identified by an SLP. It's really common for parents and teachers to think that an error exists in a child where it might just be a developmental process as they get to the age that that sound is expected. So it's important to sort of have a speech therapist lay eyes on that child and let you know. Within our Calgary Catholic School District, treatment can come in many forms. It could be some direct support. It could be more indirect, which would involve us coaching people that might work with the child, or it could be a home program where we send strategies home for the parent to sort of use to support the child. The following strategies I'm going to show are great for both the classroom and at home. So I think that whether you're a parent watching or a member of the school staff watching, all of these tips and tricks can be used anywhere. Just to remember as well, speech sounds are not quite the same as the ABCs. So it's easy to think of ABCs kind of targeting speech sounds, but the attachment that I have there sort of outlines that they're a little bit different. For example, C doesn't have its own specific sound, right? Sometimes it's a ka, sometimes it's a sound. So sometimes we try and really not focus on the ABCs or the letters, but the speech sounds themselves. Some general strategies that I think would be really great to sort of keep this in mind and refer back to. So once you go, okay, I need to work on the K sound with my child, this is sort of how you can do it in some different ways. So it could be listening activities where maybe you're choosing a book that has a lot of your child's sounds targeted within it. Even if your child isn't practicing it, them hearing you say that sound over and over, it's sort of like an auditory bombardment. And that's a really great way to tune their own brains into, hey, I need to pay attention to this sound. This is how it should sound. So that's one thing you could do in terms of listening. Another favorite strategy that we love is recasting the child's errors. So not necessarily saying you said that wrong, pointing it out. If a child said, I have a tat at home, you could go, oh, you have a cat at home. You have a cat. Where you're slowing down, you're really trying to focus on the sound that they mispronounced without specifically sort of telling them and making them kind of self-conscious about it. Minimal pairs are kind of a similar idea to that. So they're sort of an example listed there on the screen where sometimes you can sort of act confused, right? You can use it to give the choice back. Oh, you said pyre or fire, right? Helping the child to see that the sound that they're saying might not be what they think they're saying in their head. We're trying to kind of help them show that they might not realize that they're mispronouncing it. And we're just trying to draw their attention to it so that they can start to correct it. In that sense, providing specific feedback is very important. So whenever you're going to target any of these sounds with a student or your own child, it's really good to tell them what positive things they did by being specific and then giving them corrections that are specific. Oh, you had a really clear S sound when you said that. Or, oh, I think I heard your ta instead of your S sound. Let's try that again, right? Children don't really understand what good job means if they're trying to work on a bunch of things at once. So if we can really show them what they did a good job on, I think that would be very helpful. It's also nice to sort of set aside time for speech practice that could be within a routine. Everybody is living busy lives and busy school schedules and things like that. So why not take something that the child's already doing every day and work your speech practice into that? So a great example would be the arrival routine. Maybe if you were working on the K sound, and it's shocking how many words come up with the K sound in them that you are probably saying every day anyways, but maybe you use that to point out to the child, like, oh, try and say this sound with me. Let's say welcome together or something like that. So these are just good strategies to keep in mind. Sorry, I just saw the chat there. I can't quite see the chat. So if anyone has anything, I will try and keep my eyes on it. And you can ask questions throughout, but I will leave time for questions at the end. So moving forward, when you are practicing a speech sound, not only do you want to keep all these strategies in mind, but you also want to keep in mind what sound level you're targeting it at. So if you sort of look at kind of this stepping hierarchy, you'll see that we start with a sound in isolation. So this example kind of shows the S's along it here. So we're going to start with the S by itself. Once we have success with that, we're going to move up the step. So we'll move on to syllable, to word, to phrase, sentence, and then conversation. So I think this is really important that we meet the child where they're at and where they're successful. So if we're working on an S sound at school and the child is in isolation, and then, you know, at home, we're trying to work on it in conversation, we're not going to have that child have a positive, successful experience, right? We want to build that capacity to get them to that level. So this is where it's really important to communicate with your speech therapist or your teacher and sort of say like, oh, where are we working at? Or if you pay attention to any homework that's being sent home, usually it'll say like, we're working on this at the word level, or put these words into sentences. We're going to work on it at the sentence level. So it's also important to note that not only do we have to do this entire hierarchy for sounds at the beginning, but then we repeat it for sounds at the middle and sounds at the end. So quite often you'll see some carryover exist, but we will target S's in different positions in this example, right? So you're going to have sock where the word is at the beginning, but then you might have bus where the word's at the end, or something in the middle like classes where you're going to have it in the middle and the end sort of thing. So it's also really important to think about where the sound is when you're targeting it and making sure that you're working on the position and the level that your child is working. And those are questions that can be asked to the speech therapist at any time. Everyone's happy to share, oh, we're doing the S sound in the middle at the word level, right? Just so that you know exactly what you should be doing. So some things to keep in mind. As we move forward, I'm going to bring out my incredibly not creepy mouth, just because we're going to be talking about positioning within the mouth and a little bit easier to see this. So as you can see, the tongue, we're going to talk about the front or the tip of the tongue and the back. Some other important things to point out are, it's called the alveolar ridge on here, but it's sort of the bumpy space just behind the teeth. So if you kind of take your tongue and slide it just behind your teeth, you're going to feel those bumps. That's a great cue that we often encourage children to do. So if you guys are able to understand it, then hopefully you can pass it along to a child. We'll keep this in mind. And now we will move on to the speech sounds that are going to be listed by grade level to show when they're expected to develop. This is important because, again, quite often I'll find parents or teachers are concerned about a sound that's actually developmentally appropriate to be incorrect. So A common one is the R sound. Our favorite friend, the R sound, is actually expected to develop all the way until the end of grade 2. Probably by grade 3, we're going to start targeting it, but it's not a cause for alarm if a child in kindergarten can't say an R sound. So I think it's really important to look at the age that each of these are sort of being acquired. So the first sound we'll discuss is our K or G sound. This is done, and I hope everyone's at home doing some speech stuff with me, but basically this is done by keeping the tip of your tongue down and the back of your tongue raised. So your tongue tip is down in the front and it makes contact, just the back of your tongue to the top there. So, right? The G is done the exact same way, just with your voice turned on or off. So your tongue positioning does not have to change. You'll kind of see frequently we point to basically the back of our throat right here. That's kind of to cue the child that that's the back part of our tongue that needs to go up. So the reason why we also point to the back is a common error you will see is T, or a T sound for a K, which would be the same as a D sound for a G. This is done when instead of letting the front of the tongue stay down, the child lets it come up. T, T. So we're trying to teach the child to keep the tongue down in the front and up in the back. That's why you'll kind of see one of the tips there is to keep the mouth open. If the mouth is open, that tongue has further to travel to reach the top. So we're just trying to make it a little bit harder. Quite often you're going to see that using a mirror is a great cue because it's really hard for us to understand what our tongue is doing in our mouths. As adults, it's hard for us to realize. Think about a child who's never really had to think about it before. The mirror helps them see, oh, this is what it looks like when the front of my tongue stays down, the back of my tongue stays up. So I feel like almost any of these speech sounds, a mirror is a great cue, but this one's really helpful for them to see, oh, look, the front of our tongue is staying down. The back of our tongue is going up. And the next sound that also we would sort of see in kindergarten, we would expect to have developed, so we might give it some extra support, is our F sound. So the F sound is done by biting your bottom lip with your top teeth and blowing the air out. A V sound actually develops a little bit later. We would kind of expect it to tailor to the end of kindergarten when it would start to develop, but that is done the exact same way just by turning your voice on. So turning your voice on and off is your voice box itself. You can feel it vibrating. And sometimes if I have children that are able to do an F, for example, but a V is really hard, just giving them that tactile cue, having them touch their own throat, they can feel it shaking versus you won't be able to feel any of that. So for the F sound, some cues that are going to be really helpful, again, the mirror, it's going to be incredibly useful, is to let the child see biting their tongue. So if they were going to do a P for an F, which is an error we might see, right? So first off, a mirror, I'm going to cue them to bite their lip. We call this bunny teeth sometimes. And then also to make it a long sound, right? I can make a for a long time, whereas is one of our shorter sounds. So different things, cue them to make a long sound, cue them to bite their teeth, and then have them use a mirror so they can see it themselves. Our next sound group for kindergarten that we would sort of want to have developed by the time a child reaches kindergarten is S blends. So S blends are an S sound with another consonant sound right behind them. So the ones that I have listed here are SP, ST, SK, and so on. Basically, the reason they're challenging is that you're putting two consonant sounds together. So a child has to produce one and immediately produce another. They don't have a vowel to break it up to allow their tongue to readjust. So common errors are going to be dropping of one of the sounds in the S blend. So if it was spoon, for example, you'll hear children say poon or soon, right? So the spoon together is really hard for them to do. Basically, what we want to do in terms of tips for helping a child make some S blends is try and make the S sound longer. Give them a longer time to sort of slide it in. So if you're looking at these pictures here, pot, right? So we're going to make a long S sound with the rest of it, and we're going to slowly blend them together for them to say spot, 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 right? We're trying to show them that there's an S sound with the other sound there together. For the S, you can slide your finger down your arm to show that there's an S sound there. And then you can touch your hand for the following consonant. So quite often, if a child's forgetting one of the sounds, so if we were doing star, I'd go tar, tar. And it's to show them that not only do I want them to make the S sound, but I want them to make that T sound at the end. This is where I find writing out S blends is very helpful. Even if your child doesn't understand letters, it's not so much about the letters themselves, it's showing them that there's two sounds we want them to produce together. So usually I'll take a whiteboard or anything, and you can use this as well as a cue, right? Right? We're trying to show the child that, oh, I heard you say poon, spoon. You've got your S sound. Try again. Poon. So sometimes just that extra visual is really helpful. If you have a piece of paper handy, write it out. If not, your arm does the same trick. We're just trying to show the child that they need to make two of those sounds together. Let's move on. The next one that is a really tricky sound to work on is lateral lisping. And this is really often confused with frontal lisping. So the difference here is this is an S sound that they will lisp on, but this lisp is where the air escapes to the sides of your mouth. The best way I can describe it is a slushy sound. So it's very different than, which would be a frontal lisp, which in kindergarten is developmentally appropriate. We expect children to sort of go through that frontal lisp stage as they kind of figure out how to make an S sound. The lateral lisp, on the other sound, is not developmentally appropriate. So if we ever hear it as speech clinicians, we sort of know, oh, this child needs a little bit more help to sort this out, because this is not something that would clear itself on its own. It usually needs the involvement of a speech therapist and then the home practice and the school practice alongside it. So the lateral lisp is, like I said, the air you can kind of see on that visual, it's escaping from the side. Right? So if it's here, it's coming out these sides, making it slushy. So essentially what we want to focus on is teaching the child to push the air out the front. And that's going to help kind of that slushy sound into a clear. So one of the things that you can do is to have the child hold it on that bumpy spot we learned about earlier. So quite often I'll show them, we have a bumpy spot right behind the front of our teeth. It's in the front, it's in the middle. You're going to hold your tongue on that bumpy spot, and then we're going to use that. So this is how you use a T sound to shape it into. So sometimes we call it the lazy T or the flat tire sound. You're going to hold that T and turn it into an S. So ta, ta. And that's where you're holding that tongue there in the front and you're trying to push the air out the middle. Ta, ta, quite often I'll use a finger so the child can have that feedback themselves. They can feel the air, and I'll go, I don't feel any air on my finger. Oh, I feel the air on my finger. That helps to teach them that it's not this air coming out the sides. We want to help push the air out the front of the mouth. So usually a lateral lisp is something that a speech therapist will have to kind of work with themselves, get it to a point where the child's able to be successful at school in our sessions before we would have them practice it at home. This is one where we have to be very careful we're not practicing the wrong sound, because then we're just further reinforcing sort of this speech habit that we're trying to break. So this is one that really follow the discretion of your speech therapist. They will give you different cues. This is just a common one I listed, but there are many other ones that can be tried. And they'll let you know what is most helpful and what is most useful for the child with the lateral lisp. So now we will move on to grade 1. So essentially, those are the sounds that you will likely see us provide some additional support, whether it's through a home program or some direct support in kindergarten. Now up to grade 1, we include L as a sound we would hope to have developed by this point. So L is done by placing the tip of our tongue behind our upper front teeth, again in that bumpy spot. It's a really good feedback cue for kids. And it's done with placing our tongue at the tip and coming down. So la, 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 right? A common error you will see children do is a W for an L sound, wah. So you'll see them say wyin for lion, right? Basically, this is where I find it's really helpful to kind of draw some attention to the child's lips, because as you can see, wah, wah, that's done by the lips coming in together. right? Whereas la, la, la is done by me keeping my lips open. So that mirror is going to be great feedback where the child can see, oh, I brought my lips in, I made a W sound, let's try it again. So I really try and remind them to keep their lips open and retracted in a big smile, right? La, la, la. Sometimes we'll call this the singing sound, right? La, 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 where you're really trying to show the child that their tongue should be coming up behind their teeth. La, la, la. Keeping our lips as far apart as we can, right? L can fall into L blends, and those usually develop in the second grade. So right now in the first grade, we would just be focusing on L without another consonant sound around it, whereas you can see the note there that L blends, which is where it has a consonant sound and then an L. So play, blue, club. Those are harder because now instead of having our mouth ready to make an L sound, it's making another sound ahead of it. And then we've got to get into the L right away. So those develop a little bit later. Don't be surprised if you have a child that can say lion, but they say boo for blue or play for play. So again, it's just them sorting it out. It's really good if they can make the L sound. We're hoping that that would generalize over to those L blends. So again, L is just at the tip, la. And we're going to move on to grade 2. So we've sort of touched on all the sounds that we are trying to keep an ear on or an ear out for until the end of grade 1. So now into grade 2, we are starting to look at the sh sound. So this is done by making your lips into a circle. That's first the really helpful clue for kids. And the second is the body of our tongue is going to raise up. So the whole body of our tongue is going up to the top while our lips are rounding. So you'll see quite often this is called the quiet sound quite naturally. And so we like to cue it by placing our finger in front of our mouth, like we're telling someone to be quiet. What you can do as well, because lip rounding is a really important part for this sound, is you can use your hand, so your thumb and your middle finger, to push the lips forward. You can show this on yourself, or sometimes you can do this to the child just to show them, oh, we need to push our lips forward. The reason why the lip rounding is so important for an SH sound is common errors you will hear is an S. So for example, if a child says seep for sheep, a really good way to cue them is to get them to round their lips. So I will bring out the mirror again, and I'll have the child watch their lips. I'll say, oh, make sure your lips make a circle. And quite often making the lips into a circle will help remind them to keep their tongue up and to make a sh sound. So if they can watch themselves say seep and go, oh, I didn't see a circle, and try it again, sheep, they can kind of start to make their own cues of fluent. So a mirror is really helpful just to promote sort of some of that lip rounding going on there. In grade 2 as well, so sort of a progression from the sh sound is the ch and j sound. So these two sounds are done with the tongue in the same spot. The j just has your voice turned on. So again, kind of like the F and the V or the K and the G, these two are the same sound, just one has your voice turned on. So ch, j. You can kind of feel that the j has our voice box working. So how this sound is done, it's done by placing the tongue tip at the roof of your mouth behind your upper front teeth, again, finding that bumpy spot, right? And then you're gonna lower the tongue while rounding the lips. So this is actually a T and an SH sound done together. So this is why typically if we were gonna work on a ch sound, we would want the child to have an SH sound. Because if they don't have their SH sound, a ch sound is gonna be even harder because we need that SH sound in place. So this is sort of a nice progression. That's why you'll see the common errors are a T for a ch or a duh for a j, because quite often it could be that the child doesn't have that SH there to add it. So if you were going to do it, you could call the ch sound a choo-choo sound, a chopping sound, a sneezing sound, choo. Whereas j can be called the jumping sound. Quite often we try and give sounds other names because it makes it fun. For children that maybe don't have their letter recognition just yet, it helps them to understand what we're working on, but it also sometimes lets them think they're learning a new sound. And sometimes that's enough that a child needs to kind of change their motor pattern and learn something new. So if you wanted to try a ch sound, you could do the T and the SH sound apart and then slowly bring them together. So tsh, 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 right? So we're slowly taking those two sounds and trying to merge together. The same technique could be done for the j sound. So, d, j, d, j, d, j, 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 j. So we're just trying to teach the child to sort of make those short sounds together. Like I said, we really need to be careful and make sure that the SH is already in place so that a tip like this is helpful for the child. Again, the lip rounding is going to be really important. This one is just a shorter sound, whereas the ch, or sorry, the SH before it is longer. So sh can be long, whereas ch, 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 we're kind of stopping it by adding that T sound. And as I progress now to grade 3. So this is where you're going to see the frontal lisp come in. So generally, children will lisp their S sounds as they're developing. This is their way of learning how to make an S sound. This is a natural progression that we expect to see. It gets to a certain point, though, that we would hope that the child will have kind of corrected it on their own. If they haven't, then we go, okay, they might need some extra support. So up until grade 3, we're sort of still kind of allowing the child to develop this sound on their own, because quite often they're able to sort of correct it and learn these things themselves. By grade 3, they might benefit from a little extra support and knowledge that can be done at home, or even some tips given at school, sort of thing. So basically, we'll learn how to make an S sound and then some tips to help with the frontal lisping. So an S sound is done by placing our tongue behind our upper front teeth. Again, it's going to go to that bumpy spot, kind of our golden spot that helps us. And you're going to try and keep the lips retracted into that big smile with the teeth closed. Okay, so the tongue is up here. You can sort of see just the tip of the tongue is up and the teeth are closed. Right? You're going to have that nice long sound going on. So sometimes we will take our finger and either slide it along our chin or slide it along our arm. This shows the child that the sound is long or continuous. So a T sound, t, 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 I can't make a T very long, but an S you can go on forever. So that's something you'll see. Gestural cues like that are really helpful, because sometimes if the child says the error, I don't have to say it back to them, but I can do this. And that's their way of going, oh, right, I need to make it my long sound. Now, if it was done as a frontal lisp, that is done by having the tongue stick out or protrude between the upper and lower teeth. So it's not easy to show on this thing, but that is the tongue sort of sticking out in between, right? Basically making a TH sound. So that would be the child saying soap or soap. Right? You can see their tongue poking out in between. All right, so some common cues to fix that are: first, remind or cue the child, bite your teeth together. You can use your hand if you don't have a handy mouth puppet lying around. But really, we want to remind them, right? Bite those teeth together, bite your teeth together. If those teeth are bitten together, that tongue can't poke out, right? The mirror. Incredibly helpful for the child to see, oh, did I keep my teeth together or did I let my tongue poke out, right? We want to help them sort of learn this on their own, right? We're here to help them, but they're the ones that need to do the true gain in that. So the mirror helps them sort of get some own self-awareness and some self-monitoring. Another one that you'll commonly hear is S is referred to as the snake sound, right? Because it's nice and long. So we call the snake your tongue and its cage is your teeth. So that's why you'll see the visual there. So quite often we'll talk about keeping the snake in its cage. So that just means to bite the teeth together so that that snake can't come out of its cage, right? You can find pictures, like if you look up snake in cage, you can see that, or it's just a nice way, especially for some of the, younger children to understand, like, oh, snake in your cage versus I saw your tongue poke out on your S sound. Some children like the snake in the cage reference a little bit more. But yeah, so basically if this child, or if your child is doing this, or a child in your class is doing this, first work on them biting that teeth together, really cueing that. You can use the snake in the cage terminology to help keep it together. But that's the main thing, is we want this to have the teeth not allow that tongue to escape. It's important to remember that this will be done in the middle and at the end of words as well, right? So it's easy to sort of get our tongue ready with our teeth together if the S sound is at the beginning, right? Soap. But for a word like bus, my mouth is open before the S sound. So it is helpful if you're practicing with your child to really work on it in other positions as well. So they know every time I have that S sound coming up, I need to bite my teeth together. Bus, right? Just practicing, letting them see it in the mirror, letting them watch you produce it, and they can see what to look for, having different pictures, all different ways to help with some of that frontal lisping for the S sound. And the other one that is everyone's favorite is our R sound. So R sound, again, is something that we expect the children to mispronounce as they're learning to make it. R is a really tricky sound because we'll go over it, but there's different ways to make it. So it can be really impacted by the sounds around it. Different vowel sounds in front or behind an R can change it. R is a really tricky sound for kids to do. So if a child is in kindergarten or grade 1, we expect them to make errors on their R sounds because they're figuring out how to make it themselves. It's only by the time they reach the 3rd grade that we're hoping to have had this sound sorted out. If it hasn't, sometimes additional support could be helpful. So to make an R sound, like I said, there are 2 different ways to do it. I find the image of the hand cues are really helpful to sort of show the difference. The first one is bunched. So bunched is essentially by taking your tongue and pulling it back in your mouth. So if this is the tongue, you're pulling it backwards, right? So basically you're just trying to get the whole body of the tongue back in your mouth. That's where you'll kind of see the growling sound or things like that, right? It really helps to remind a child to pull their tongue back. The other way a R sound can be made is the retroflex, or the second one there. And that is done by using the tip of the tongue and putting it up behind the front teeth. It goes a little bit further back than sort of all the other bumpy spots that we've seen, but essentially it's the tongue tip up. So that's why for the second hand cue, you'll see it this way. So basically, some children use both ways to make a tongue, some use one or the other. It's usually just practice to see which one they have more success at, and we go from there with it. But for that second one, so again, the tip of my tongue is going back on this one. Basically, some cues to help with that. If I was working on a retroflex tongue, or that's the one where the tip goes, I would start with an L sound, which we know is done on that bumpy tip spot, and then I would have the child move the tongue backwards. So, right? So I know the tongue tip is at the right spot for the L. So if a child's able to make an L sound, we can use that to our advantage. Have them make the L and slide their tongue backwards. If the child makes a bunched position, so that's the one where the tongue gets pulled back in your mouth, have them start with an SH sound and pull it backwards. So the SH, you'll remember, just had the whole tongue body going up. So really, you're just going to teach them to pull it back in their mouth, right? So sure. Those are some nice ways to take a sound that the child's producing. So as long as your child is able to make an L or an SH, we can use those to our advantage and try and shape an R sound from them. Some common errors as well that you will see quite often are the W for the R sound, so wed for red. This is similar in the tip that we used for the W for the L sound, is that we want to draw attention to the lips, right? Wah, wah, versus rah, rah, rah. So again, we're going to really try and teach the child to kind of keep their mouth big. You can call it a smile. You can tell them to show their teeth, but we want to avoid letting those lips come in, right? So if we can draw attention to keeping their mouth open and pulling their tongue back, red, red, red. Again, using a mirror to help the child see their own would be very helpful in this case as well. R sound is quite tricky because, like I said, it takes a long time to develop. It can change a lot with it. So this is where it would be really important to sort of get the advice of your speech therapist to know, different ways you can target it, different positions. Some children do better targeting R at the end of a sound first before we target it at the beginning, right? So this is one where it's really good to sort of see if you get a home program or anything along those lines to take a look at the different positions that the R can have, keeping some tips like this in mind. Any of those things can be really helpful. And we have one more sound. So the last sound that I'll discuss today is our TH sound. And this is sort of all the way up until grade 4, we could see this sound developing. Quite often you will hear children make it a shorter sound, so a t or a duh for it. So dis for this. You might also see an F or a V. So teeth for teeth, right? So you can see that they're trying to get the placement right and things like that. The TH sound can be made voiced or voiceless. So that means with our voice box on or off. So think about teeth versus this, right? You can kind of feel that sometimes the voices can turn on. However, it's always made the same way with having your tongue stick out between your upper and lower teeth. So quite often I'll tell a child to bite their tongue, right? It seems like a funny way, but stick your tongue out, bite it, right? Keep it out and blow. So this is a really helpful one with a mirror because the child can see their tongue out. They should be seeing it. It's one of the few speech sounds ever that we're going to encourage the child to get that tongue outside of the mouth and poke it. So the visual feedback of a mirror is really helpful for them to see what their tongue is doing. Right? So you can kind of see, bite your tongue, stick your tongue out and blow. These are all really easy cues to remind the child that their tongue should be poking out of their mouth to do it. Again, a TH is a continuous sound, so it's one of those longer sounds. So if they're making a t or a duh, you can say, oh, that was a short sound. Try again and make it long. Let's stick our tongue out and make a long sound. Right? So as long as it's a long sound, it should hopefully help that child make it nice and continuous. So basically, those are kind of the sounds in a quick nutshell that we went over, kind of keeping in mind the progression of when a sound is expected to develop, and then also how to work on it. So you've had a speech therapist say, okay, we need to work on our K sound. Now at least you have some ideas on how to use it. The 3 websites that are listed here are some really great free resources that have all of these speech sounds. They have worksheets available. The second link there has some great videos, and they have the speech sounds in different positions. So the first one, for example, Mommy Speech Therapy, you can find a K initial practice worksheet, a K medial, which means it's in the middle, or a K final, where it's at the end. So if you were able to say, oh, I know that my speech therapist is working on K final words, you can go on there and find tons of free worksheets and word lists that you can put home. All of these have some great resources. Like I said in there, just make sure you consult your SLP to know what level to do it. Keep in mind the hierarchy as well. So making sure that we know we work on sounds by themselves before we put them at, a syllable level, then a word level, as we work all of our way up to sentences and conversation. Another great way to do it is books. So books are a wonderful way to work on any speech sound you can. You can have the child help you. This also builds some print awareness, which is a great bonus. But if you were working on the L sound, try and find as many things in that book, whether it's pictures or words, that start with the L sound or end with the L sound. The thing that I really like about this is that this can be done at a whole class level because it's great for every child. Like I said, it works on print awareness. It can work on some phonological awareness as well. So you can have the whole class during your story time, look on the letter of the day and practice saying it. You can teach your whole class how to make an L sound by putting your tongue up behind the tip of your tongue up behind the front of your teeth, right? So this doesn't have to be necessarily an individual targeted piece. That can be something where you work on it at a center or a large group or individually, but it's something that really everybody can benefit from. I just saw from the chat. Oh, yes. Thank you. Leanna answered. Yeah. So I believe, let me jump in here. So that was sort of the end of the presentation. Thank you for joining me on a evening. I tried to not take too long. Basically, this presentation, we will have it recorded and posted, and you can get the slides as well. What was I going to say? Yeah, so like Leanna said, we are going to post it on our YouTube channel, and then we also have an EPD website for the therapy team that it can be posted. And then that way the staff can access it as well. I'm just wondering if anyone has any other questions about any of the information that was shared. This is where I think referring back to the presentation later will probably be helpful to know exactly which sound you need to work on and then look for the tips there. I'll just wait and see if anyone else comes up. Thank you guys for joining. I hope it made some sense. The mouth is helpful, I hope. Awesome.
Thanks so much, Chelsea. I will stop the recording.